Me fui a chambear ahí en el Home Depot.
Me fui a chambear ahí en el Home Depot.
Me subí a la troca de un patrón canijo.
Me subí a la troca de un patrón canijo.
Tarde me di cuenta que era un vil ratero.
Tarde me di cuenta que era un vil ratero.
Ahora no me paga ese güey mi sueldo.
Ahora no me paga ese güey mi
Y
sueldo.
por eso les canto y por eso les digo,
Ese güey no
y
paga.
por eso les canto y por eso les digo,
Ese güey no paga. Ese güey no paga. Ese güey no paga. Ese güey no paga. Ese güey no paga.
Abusado jornalero, porque ese güey no paga. Puros cheques de hule que rebotan. Point, point, point. Alto, cara de yo no fui, patilla larga, bigote caído, ceja poblada. No le da confianza, no le da confianza.
me fui a chambear ahí en el Home Depot.
Me fui a chambear ahí en el Home Depot.
Me subí a la troca de un patrón canijo.
Me subí a la troca de un patrón canijo.
Tarde me di cuenta que era un vil ratero.
Tarde me di cuenta que era un vil ratero.
Ahora no me paga ese güey mi sueldo.
Ahora no me paga ese güey mi
Y
sueldo.
por eso les canto y por eso les digo,
Ese güey no
y
paga.
por eso les canto y por eso les digo,
Ese güey no paga. Ese güey no paga. Ese güey no paga. Ese güey no paga.
ese güey no paga.
Y abusado, anote la placa, tómele foto, anote la dirección, negocie bien antes de subirse a cualquier carro o troca. Dígale que hoy no se fía, mañana sí. Día pagado, día trabajado, jejepa. Cuídate jornalera, cuídate jornalero. Que no te trancen, que no te trancen, jejepa.
Y por eso les canto y por eso les digo,
Ese güey no
y
paga.
por eso les canto y por eso les digo,
Ese güey no
y
paga.
si sale su esposa también le digo,
Ese güey no
y
paga.
salieron sus hijos y yo le digo,
Ese güey no
y
paga.
salió su vecino y yo le digo,
Ese güey no paga.
llegó la reportera y yo le digo,
Ese güey no paga.
llegó la policía y yo le digo,
Ese güey no paga.
llegó el periodista y yo le digo,
Ese güey no
y
paga.
salió su Sancho y yo le digo,
Ese güey no paga. Ese güey no paga. Ese güey no paga. Ese güey no paga. No paga ese güey. Jornalero soy. Jornalero voy. Jornalera soy. Jornalera voy.
por ahí dicen muchos que el jornalero no es artista porque no usa corbata cuando se lanza a la pista. Y es que para cantarle al pueblo no necesito ni un traje, traje lo que a ti te falta, valentía y coraje.
Jornalero
que soy muy desafinado. Yo les contesto y digo, me encanta aquí a mi lado. Muchos me critican que soy músico maleta, pero nunca les he visto cantar en una protesta. Óyeme qué rico que está, canto pa'l trabajador. Pa' mi pueblo con amor. Este es el canto de protesta, las vivencias de la gente, lo que muchos no cantan, tal vez porque no se atreven. Es que aquí no es cuestión de fama, ni de glamour, ni de dinero, es simplemente cantar las vivencias de mi pueblo. Óyeme qué rico que está, canto pa'l trabajador, pa' mi pueblo con amor. El canto jornalero.
Juzgues por mi apariencia, soy humano como vos. Sin embargo, nos separa la ignorancia, tu rencor. Andamos por el camino, tú me gritas ilegal. No valoras mi trabajo, yo no soy un criminal.
Quiero que mi voz se escuche. Quiero que mi voz se escuche.
Soy persona que construye, dando rienda a la esperanza, sacrificando mis sueños y mi esfuerzo nunca alcanza. Quieres frutos de mis manos, sin ver mi humanidad. Si gozas de mi trabajo, yo merezco igualdad.
Quiero que mi voz se escuche.
Y que se la cuente el viento, la vida del jornalero es real, no es un invento.
Quiero que mi voz se escuche.
No pagues mi libertad, el sol sale para todos, deja trabajar en paz.
Quiero que mi voz se escuche.
Y el viento alcance mi historia, la vida del inmigrante que se quede en tu memoria.
Quiero que mi voz se escuche.
Jornalero hasta la victoria, mi trabajo es tan sagrado y la suerte es mi gloria.
Me fui a chambear ahí en el Home Depot.
Me fui a chambear ahí en el Home Depot.
Me subí a la troca un patrón canijo.
Me subí a la troca de un patrón canijo.
Tarde me di cuenta que era un vil ratero.
Tarde me di cuenta que era un vil ratero.
Ahora no me paga ese güey mi sueldo.
Ahora no me pagan ese güey mi
Y
sueldo.
por eso les canto y por eso les digo.
Ese güey no
Y
paga.
por eso les canto y por eso les digo.
Ese güey no paga. Ese güey no paga. Ese güey no paga. Ese güey no paga. Ese güey no paga.
Abusado jornalero, porque ese güey no paga. Puros cheques de hule que rebotan. Point, point, point. Alto, cara de yo no fui, patilla larga, bigote caído, ceja poblada. No le haga confianza, no le haga confianza.
Me fui a chambear ahí en el Home Depot.
Me fui a chambear ahí en el Home Depot.
Me subí a la troca de un patrón canijo.
Me subí a la troca de un patrón canijo.
Tarde me di cuenta que era un vil ratero.
Tarde me di cuenta que era un vil ratero.
Ahora no me paga ese güey mi sueldo.
Ahora no me paga ese güey mi
Y
sueldo.
por eso les canto y por eso les digo.
Ese güey no
Y
paga.
por eso les canto y por eso les digo.
Ese güey no paga. Ese güey no paga. Ese güey no paga. Ese güey no paga.
Ese güey no paga.
Y abusado, abusado, anote la placa, tómele foto, anote la dirección, negocie bien antes de subirse a cualquier carro, troca. Dígale que hoy no se fía, mañana sí. Día pagado, día trabajado, jejepa. Cuídate jornalera, cuídate jornalero. Que no te trancen, que no te trancen, jejepa.
Y por eso les canto y por eso les digo.
Ese güey no
Y
paga.
por eso les canto y por eso les digo.
Ese güey no
Y
paga.
si sale su esposa también le digo.
Ese güey no
Y
paga.
salieron sus hijos y yo le digo.
Ese güey no
Y
paga.
salió su vecino y yo le digo.
Ese güey no paga.
Llegó la reportera y yo le digo.
Ese güey no paga.
Llegó la policía y yo le digo.
Ese güey no paga.
Llegó el periodista y yo le digo.
Ese güey no
Y
paga.
salió su Sancho y yo le digo.
Ese güey no paga. Ese güey no paga. Ese güey no paga. Ese güey no paga. No paga ese güey. Jornalero soy. Jornalero voy. Jornalera soy. Jornalera voy.
Por ahí dicen muchos que el jornalero no es artista porque no usa corbata cuando se lanza a la pista. Y es que para cantarle al pueblo no necesito ni un traje. Traje lo que a ti te falta, valentía y coraje.
Jornalero soy. Jornalero voy.
Oye, qué rico que está.
Jornalera soy. Jornalera voy.
Me critican que soy músico maleta, pero nunca les he visto cantar en una protesta.
Jornalero soy. Jornalero voy.
Óyeme qué rico que está.
Jornalero soy.
Canto pa'l trabajador.
Jornalero voy.
Pa' mi pueblo con amor.
Jornalero soy.
Este es el canto de protesta.
Jornalero voy.
Las vivencias de la gente.
Jornalero soy.
Lo que muchos no cantan.
Jornalero voy.
Tal vez porque no se atreven.
Jornalero soy.
Es que aquí no es cuestión de fama, ni de glamour, ni de
Jornalero
dinero. Es simplemente cantar las vivencias de mi pueblo.
Jornalero soy.
Óyeme qué rico que está.
Jornalero voy.
Canto pa'l trabajador.
Jornalero soy.
Pa' mi pueblo con amor.
Jornalero voy.
El canto jornalero.
Juzgues por mi apariencia, soy humano como vos. Sin embargo, no separa la ignorancia, tu rencor. Andamos por el camino, tú me gritas ilegal. No valoras mi trabajo, yo no soy un criminal.
Quiero que mi voz se escuche. Quiero que mi voz se escuche.
Soy persona que construye, dando rienda a la esperanza, sacrificando mis sueños y mi esfuerzo nunca alcanza. Quieres frutos de mis manos, sin ver mi humanidad. Si gozas de mi trabajo, yo merezco igualdad.
Quiero que mi voz se escuche.
Y que se la cuente el viento. La vida del jornalero es real, no es un invento.
Quiero que mi voz se escuche.
No pagues mi libertad, el sol sale para todos, deja trabajar en paz.
Quiero que mi voz se escuche.
Y el viento alcance mi historia, la vida del inmigrante que se quede en tu memoria.
Quiero que mi voz se escuche.
Jornalero hasta la victoria, mi trabajo es tan sagrado y la suerte es mi gloria.
a chambear ahí en el Home Depot.
Me fui a chambear ahí en el Home Depot.
Me subí a la troca de un patrón canijo.
Me subí a la troca de un patrón canijo.
Tarde me di cuenta que era un vil ratero.
Tarde me di cuenta que era un vil ratero.
Ahora no me paga ese güey mi sueldo.
Ahora no me paga ese güey mi
Y
sueldo.
por eso les canto y por eso les digo.
Ese güey no
Y
paga.
por eso les canto y por eso les digo.
Ese güey no paga. Ese güey no paga. Ese güey no paga. Ese güey no paga. Ese güey no paga.
Abusado jornalero, porque ese güey no paga. Puros cheques de hule que rebotan. Point, point, point. Alto, cara de yo no fui, patilla larga, bigote caído, ceja poblada. No le haga confianza, no le haga confianza.
Me fui a chambear ahí en el Home Depot.
Me fui a chambear ahí en el Home Depot.
Me subí a la troca de un patrón canijo.
Me subí a la troca de un patrón canijo.
Tarde me di cuenta que era un vil ratero.
Tarde me di cuenta que era un vil ratero.
Ahora no me paga ese güey mi sueldo.
Ahora no me paga ese güey mi
Y
sueldo.
por eso les canto y por eso les digo.
Ese güey no
Y
paga.
por eso les canto y por eso les digo.
Ese güey no paga. Ese güey no paga. Ese güey no paga. Ese güey no paga. Ese güey no paga.
Y abusado, anote la placa, tómele foto, anote la dirección, negocie bien antes de subirse a cualquier carro, troca. Dígale que hoy no se fía, mañana sí. Día pagado, día trabajado, jejepa. Cuídate jornalera, cuídate jornalero. Que no te trancen, que no te trancen, jejepa.
Y por eso les canto y por eso les digo.
Ese güey no
Y
paga.
por eso les canto y por eso les digo.
Ese güey no
Y
paga.
si sale su esposa también le digo.
Ese güey no
Y
paga.
salieron sus hijos y yo le digo.
Ese güey no
Y
paga.
salió su vecino y yo le digo.
Ese güey no paga.
Llegó la reportera y yo le digo.
Ese güey no paga.
Llegó la policía y yo le digo.
Ese güey no paga.
Llegó el periodista y yo le digo.
Ese güey no
Y
paga.
salió su Sancho y yo le digo.
Ese güey no paga. Ese güey no paga. Ese güey no paga. Ese güey no paga. No paga ese güey.
Hey there. On behalf of the board of the International Labor Rights Forum, Global Labor Justice, I want to welcome you to the 2020 Labor Defenders Awards. I'm Erica Smiley, the Executive Director of Jobs with Justice, which, like the ILRF, was founded in the 1980s by labor and community allies who had a deep belief in mutual reciprocity, that to build the future of our labor movement, working people had to commit to showing up for fights beyond their own. That was our pledge, for us, our I'll Be There pledge. At Jobs with Justice, we see transnational organizing strategies as fundamental to building collective bargaining power and democracy in the 21st century. Because of this, we've worked with U.S. unions on global solidarity strategies and mobilization. We've seeded organizations and partners like the Asia Floor Wage Alliance. We served on the board of the ILRF for many years, and in 2017 we helped launch what would become Global Labor Justice, an important evolution that built on lessons and experiences in global collaboration from worker centers throughout the United States, particularly the collaboration known as the United Worker Congress. The arrival of global labor justice could not have been timelier. Multinational corporations have leaned on white supremacy to keep working people divided and powerless. Because of this, the entire global economy is in peril with growing right-wing authoritarianism, both at home and abroad, and an ever-increasing economic inequality. But while we may feel somewhat deflated by the mounting pressure, we're not defeated, and in fact, we see opportunity in the hope of a new progressive internationalism. This crisis in capitalism is an opportunity to build new infrastructure and platforms. Organizing and collective bargaining, as we know, is fundamental to democracy in the economic arena and in general, and we want everyone to have access to it in some form. Together, we have all the power to stop and start production, the power to control our labor and skills in any given market, the power to kick people out of elected office or put companies out of business if they exploit us. Global Labor Justice, the International Labor Rights Forum, as an organization, is poised to help us do this. And the awardees, in their own way, are examples of the way forward. Our situation is not hopeless. This is not a time to be apocalyptic. We have all the power. It is ours to exercise. Together, let's stop leaving it on the table.
All right. Welcome, everyone. I'm JJ Rosenbaum with Global Labor Justice and the International Labor Rights Forum. I'm really appreciative of everyone to be here with us today. I use the pronouns she, her, hers. I want to offer a special thanks to Smiley of Jobs with Justice for kicking us off today and reminding us that we have the vision and the power. Jobs with Justice is kicking us off today as a critical partner to both Global Labor Justice and the International Labor Rights Forum, and helping us get where we are today. We really look to Smiley as a key U.S. strategist on two fundamental issues. The first is how collective bargaining in its old forms and its new forms is fundamental to a healthy democracy, and we need more of it. And the second is how the battle against white supremacy and corporate power cannot be separated, and it's essential to fight both for working people to win. I was now going to use the time to invite you all to jump in the chat and say hello, but I hear that that's already happening. So I want to ask you guys to keep that up. And for example, if you're a member or an organizer or a leader in your union, put your union in the chat and let us know you're here. If you're part of a worker center or an immigrants' rights organization, put that in there. If you're a teacher or a student at a school, if you're friends or family of one of the awardees or one of the staff members of our organizations, shout them out there. Shout out where you're from. I'm guessing we have friends from Washington, D.C. and New York. I know we have friends from Florida, from Tennessee and Texas and Chicago, from Houston and Portland and Los Angeles. So shout out where you're from. I also know that we have partners and friends in the Spanish language room from Mexico and El Salvador and Honduras. Please shout out where you're from, that you're here, the organizations you're with. And a special shout out to our friends very late at night in Ghana who are joining us, who are members and with the General Agricultural Workers Union. Please let us know you're here, and we appreciate you. I know for some of you, this is an event, especially our friends in Washington, D.C., you come to every year. We see each other, we celebrate the wins of the year, we catch up, we talk behind the awardees and share strategies. And we're really sorry that we're missing each other in person this year. And we hope that to be with you again soon in person. We also know that there's a lot of folks that are joining us today that this is your first time to this event. So we really welcome you as well. And we hope that we'll we'll be lifelong friends and we'll continue to see you in the future. In the midst of this pandemic, we're both more isolated and more aware of how the economy is linking us across borders and the impact of greater inequality among people and countries. And we're also, as we all are today, building the muscle of learning and getting more comfortable of ways to work together and build real strategies together. And I'm grateful for that. And I'm grateful to all of you for helping us do that today. Before we start with the awards, and I know that's why everyone's here and everyone's excited to get to that, we have a short presentation reminding us of the collaborations in the past year. And this was very meaningful to me as we did it, as it seems like it's hard to remember any time before March. So we hope that you'll see your own faces and your own marches and your own efforts in as we go through this, the efforts to win living wages, healthy and safe workplaces, to end gender-based violence and harassment. We'll see a lot of pictures of that amazing fight at the ILO where workers, employers, and governments came together to have a new international convention against gender-based violence, and to link our labor struggles with those struggles demanding racial, gender, migrant, and climate justice. So I hope you'll find yourselves and your friends in there. Shout us out in the comments when you do. If you're not in there, we really hope next year we'll see you standing beside us in the coming year in 2021. I'm lucky that the first person I have the honor of introducing tonight is Stuart Applebaum. Stuart is president of the Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union and executive vice president of the United Food and Commercial Workers. From New York, his home area, to Washington, D.C., to global labor movement spaces, Stuart is known for working to build an expansive and inclusive labor movement. He's also well known for his support of innovative low-wage worker organizing campaigns in his home city of New York City, including the Retail Action Project and the Car Wash Workers Campaign and others. Important for those of us at Global Labor Justice and ILRF, his members are on the front lines of bringing consumer goods to the US market that are manufactured by many of our partner unions in the Global South. And Stuart himself has been at the forefront of bargaining and making real global framework agreements with fast fashion brands like H&M. Stuart is also always looking forward, advocating for a strong global organizing academy with the ITOC, ensuring that workers have the tools they need to organize in tandem with global campaign victories, and helping devise strategies to take on actors like Amazon and others. Thank you, Stuart, for all you do, and for presenting this Labor Rights Defender Award to Sharon Burrow, General Secretary of the ITC.
Thank you, JJ, and thank you for what you do. And good evening, everybody. It's so good to be with all of you today, even if we're meeting virtually. And I want to thank the Global Labor Justice and the International Labor Rights Forum for the important roles you play and your important work on behalf of working people everywhere. Your work has never been more necessary than it is today. The inequalities and injustices that working people face every day have only been exacerbated by the pandemic. Tonight, I have the honor of presenting a Labor Rights Defender Award to one of the most inspirational leaders I know, Sharon Burrow, the head of the global labor movement, which means she is the General Secretary of the International Trade Union Confederation, representing more than 200 million members in 332 affiliated organizations in 163 countries and territories. 2 years ago, my union was involved in a major fight with Amazon when the corporation sought to open a new headquarters in New York City, funded with taxpayer money. We argued that that was unacceptable unless Amazon changed its ways, including the horrific ways it was treating its own workforce. We understood as well that this fight was not just about one corporation, but was really about the future of work itself. We reached out to Sharon for her support, and before we knew it, she had jumped on a plane and flew to New York to lend her strong voice and support, even when others were reluctant to do so. Because Sharon understood, before others, the existential nature of this battle, and had already made Amazon one of her priorities. And together, we were able to show that you can stand up to some of the most powerful forces in society and defeat them, especially if they refuse to recognize workers' rights. We, of course, have a long, long way to go, but Sharon Burrow is leading that battle globally, as she has been leading so many other crucial battles as well. Sharon began her career as a teacher in Australia, becoming a union delegate, an organizer, and then a senior official of the New South Wales Teachers Federation, before becoming president of the Australian Education Union, and then president of Australia's National Labour Centre, the Australian Council of Trade Unions. and for the last decade, serving as the dynamic leader of the ITUC. Her lived experience is what fuels her belief in the transformative power of trade unions and collective bargaining, and the need to fight for a social contract based on shared labor values. For most of her life, Sharon has been in the vanguard of whatever she was doing. She was the first in her family to get a higher education, and she has been the first woman leader in the history of the organizations she was and is leading. Yet what makes her truly exceptional is her work to right the inequities that make her the exception and not the rule. Sharon Burrow has been the leading voice in the global effort to organize towards a new social contract, a social contract that is fair and just for all working people. In the United States and elsewhere, workers are under siege, and their rights of freedom of association and collective bargaining are under attack. With a lack of decent work, secure work, decent wages, and social protection, how can we be surprised that so many people feel disconnected? And a new social contract is desperately needed as well to deal with the major challenges of racial and gender inequalities, climate, and technology. And Sharon Burrow is also a climate warrior, a forceful advocate, working tirelessly in support of safe, fair, and just transition because of the clear linkages between climate change and employment. And now, as COVID-19 highlights the crevices and vulnerabilities of our fractured or non-existent social contract, Sharon Burrow has been on the forefront of key worker human issues related to paid sick leave, wage support, and universal access to health. Sharon, my leader, my friend, my teacher, on behalf of the Global Labor Justice, the International Labor Rights Forum, and on behalf of workers all over the world whose lives you have touched and made better, it is my honor to present to you this award. You are a labor rights defender, a labor rights warrior. Sharon, you are an inspiration. Thank you for what you do and who you are. Sharon Burrow.
So I'm humbled by this award and by Stuart's generous words. Stuart is, in fact, an inspiration to me. And so when I listen to him lay out the challenges for workers everywhere, I just want to say, that's right, thank you, good night. But JJ, thank you indeed, and thanks to all the colleagues in the organisations that I now know are indeed a merged entity, because your work is also critical. Stuart already told you I started life as a teacher, so kudos to Loretta. And let me say to all the awardees, but indeed in tribute to all the activists on the front lines around the world, that I have the most privileged job in the world. So it's actually extraordinary that I would get an award for doing my job, but I will treasure it. I get to work with workers all over the world, to go to workplaces, to meet people of all walks of life and philosophies and ethnicities, and they're all part of our family. That's pretty precious. When you think about it, we are the biggest democratic force on earth, And we have all peoples from around the world. A worker is a worker. We don't see race or colour or gender or ethnicity or indigenous backgrounds. We see people with all of those cross cultural strengths that they bring to our movement. And it's all about courage. I've walked the dehumanizing supply chains of our major multinationals. And I've sat and I've cried with families struggling to make ends meet, who've been sacked for standing up for their unions or wanting to join a union. But I've always come away inspired by the dignity and the strength of those union men and women who stand strong for justice, whatever is dished out to them. I've sat in the labour squalid camps with migrant workers, and I know that the AFL and all of you are strong fighters for migrant workers and migrant justice, and that's as it should be. But I have to thank the movement, because when I came into the movement and saw that the dehumanizing modern slavery of the kafala system was spreading around the world, I said we were going to end it in the Gulf states. And the movement looked at me and said, really? And I said, just come with me. And they did. No one was stronger than the AFL-CIO and the International Committee that Stuart and Kathy lead, with Richard right there. And we just saw off a dehumanizing set of laws. So more than 2 million workers are finally free. They're free in a labour market that looks more like an industrial, normal industrial relations. And I can tell you that for domestic workers, the laws are the same. They're free as well. And there's a minimum wage in place that's based on evidence that many countries would dream about having as a system. It's not perfect, but there's now a normal industrial relations system with courts to prove it. And we'll move on. UAE, Saudi, they're all in our sights, and we will win this battle to end modern slavery. But I can say that listening to workers' stories for the struggle to survive on poverty wages without social protection or healthcare is, as Stuart said, absolutely heartbreaking, and there's no reason for it. So tonight is a night to pay tribute to all the activists on the front lines fighting for peace and for justice, but to say to them, we are there with you and we will have that new social contract. Whether it's the fight for democracy in Belarus or universal suffrage in Somalia, the fight to defeat the corrupt authoritarian leadership in India, the Philippines, and the terror laws in the Philippines, or in Brazil, or in your own nation, to actually win back justice through a fair democracy where people are at the centre. There is so many struggles going on. And that, of course, includes the fight for equality for women, for people of colour, and indeed for migrant workers and young people. It's time we ended inequality in all of its forms, income, race, gender, and created inclusion for our young people. Every nation has its human and labour rights defenders, and overwhelmingly, we can all be proud that you will find them in our global family or in our allies. And I want to convince you that we are winning despite the odds. If you think about those domestic workers' struggles, they said we could never organise domestic workers or put a global floor of rights under domestic workers. 10 years, and we won the Domestic Workers Convention. We're organising domestic workers. We have an International Domestic Workers Federation. C190, Convention 190, the Convention to Eliminate Violence. There's no doubt 10 years it took, but we have that convention and ratifications. And the foundations to fight back against a broken social contract. Can I just tell you that we must never forget that 60% of the world's people are working in informal work, even in our countries. And those international mediated platform jobs, many of them Stuart's referred to, with the injustices of the big tech, are on our list. But even in the 40%, you know the story, a third of those workers have indeed no security at all. short-term contracts, insecure work, no social protection they can touch. The global labour force is broken, and we will fight back. We will actually put in place the labour protection floor for all workers that we fought and won last year in the ILO Centenary Declaration. Rights, minimum wages based on evidence, occupational health and safety, and maximum hours of work for everybody with universal social protection. Indeed, as well as that, the transformative agenda for women that we've committed to, and the just transition for climate and technology. So what do we want in our social contract? You tell us. That's the fight for all of us. We know we want jobs, jobs and jobs, climate-friendly jobs. We know we want universal social protection. We know we want just transition as we employment and climate-proof our future. But we want so much more. We will never again stand back and see our health, our care, our education systems underfunded. This is a fight for dignity, and it's encapsulated in our quest to realise the Sustainable Development Goals that the UN leaders committed to, which will create a world of zero carbon, zero poverty. You are at the barricades now with the presidential election. The hearts and minds of the ITUC family are with you. We all need an American democracy for the people. Solidarity, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Sharon. This is why you are the leader of our movement, and we're so proud and happy to follow you and to be part of these really important fights, as you said. It's now my honor to introduce Liz Schuler, Secretary-Treasurer of the AFL-CIO and one of the top elected officers in the US labor movement. Liz's first organizing job was organizing mostly women clerical workers, where she was one of the few women organizers at the time. And since then, she's been in a lot of positions like that. and she's known as a woman who lifts up other women around her. Under her leadership, the AFL-CIO played a key role, along with other trade unions around the world, as Sharon said, in winning the passage of Convention 190 on the International Labor Organization's 100th birthday. The convention recognized that eliminating gender-based violence and harassment at work, sometimes we call it sexual harassment in the United States, that's still a critical issue across sectors, in every country, and that doing so is fundamental to ensuring women workers have access to real freedom of association, that they can organize, lead their unions, and collectively bargain, and that they can define the issues that are important to them. We really want to thank you, Liz, for your important leadership at the AFL-CIO for so many years, and especially at this critical time. And we want to thank you for presenting this Labor Rights Defenders Award to Dr. Loretta Johnson, Secretary-Treasurer Emeritus of the American Federation of Teachers.
Hello, everyone. What an honor it is to join the Global Labor Justice International Labor Rights Forum for your Labor Rights Defenders Awards. And what a privilege it is to honor an icon of the American labor movement, someone I admire so much, Dr. Loretta Johnson. For decades, Dr. Johnson has been a powerhouse. She is well known and widely respected within the US and global labor movements. And she has always used her leadership positions to be a champion for others, especially the conditions workers face every single day at their jobs, in schools and beyond, here in America and around the world. It's hard to capture the career of Dr. Johnson in a few short minutes, but I am going to try. I, of course, knew her as a sister secretary-treasurer, but she was an AFT vice president for 30 years. She chaired the AFT Paraprofessionals and School-Related Personnel Program and Policy Council for 32 years. And she also served as president of the Baltimore Teachers Union's Paraprofessional Chapter for 35 years and as president of AFT Maryland for 17 years. Incredible. At the American Federation of Teachers, Loretta was known for standing up for everyone, teachers, paraprofessionals, nurses, and so many others who work in our education system, and help our children become lifelong learners. Dr. Johnson has been a constant advocate and uses her voice for workers who often were the most vulnerable. She's one of the most committed activists I know when it comes to racial and gender justice. So many women and people of color are living better lives because of Loretta. Having started as a paraeducator, Loretta has always had the vision and deep understanding that a good education takes a village, that every single person working in a school brings something special, something that helps students grow and dream. Loretta's focus on students is what has made her such an important ally for the International Labor Rights Forum. She has supported the work of what is now called GLJ ILRF, but throughout its decades-long campaigns to end child labor, she has been there, especially on the cocoa farms of West Africa and the cotton farms of Eastern Europe. As co-chair of their Child Labor Coalition, her deep experience as a union leader and an educator strengthened the Child Labor Coalition's mission to stamp out the worst forms of child labor and to protect teen workers from health and safety hazards. When we hear Loretta speak on the subjects of child labor and forced labor, she does it with a deep conviction and with compassion for parents who are struggling to keep their kids safe and whose lives can be transformed by the power of a union and a collective voice. In 1974, Loretta first traveled outside the United States as part of an AFL-CIO delegation of 13 young trade unionists under 40 who traveled to Germany. And that trip shaped her values, the values we're celebrating today. She also led work in Haiti, where following earthquakes, she personally oversaw the construction and funding of a clinic for primary child care for union families. And I was always moved by how Loretta jumped into action with disaster relief efforts. And I've seen firsthand how she's moved to help people she doesn't even know in times of crisis. And one of her most memorable trips outside the US was a trip to Australia, where she coincidentally visited at the same time Serena Williams was taking the trophy at the Australian Open. Aside from the labor movement, Loretta's real passion is tennis. And of course, she is absolutely obsessed with the Baltimore Ravens. Dr. Johnson, you have been at the forefront of organizing efforts and victories that cynics said were impossible. You understand the power of people uniting and standing up and fighting back. It's what you've done throughout your entire career. And your work and your will inspire us to always fight for dignity, equity, and justice. And we are so proud, I am so proud to stand on your shoulders. With all you've done for labor rights and global justice, it is an absolute honor to present you with tonight's award.
For 54 years, as an active member and leader of the American Federation of Teachers, Loretta Johnson has worked tirelessly to promote workers' rights, civil rights.
When AFT shows up, it's justice. And that's what we're fighting for.
Human rights,
Great speech, great speech.
and economic rights. Loretta has expanded collective bargaining rights for thousands of AFT members. Loretta has been a champion for paraprofessionals and strengthened the AFT's voice and power around the country and the world. Under Loretta's leadership, the AFT has grown to become one of the most effective and powerful unions in the United States.
Who are we? AFT! Who are we? AFT!
The street that the marchers marched up in 1965 from the Selma to Montgomery.
We come together for this journey of justice, but it's not just a journey of justice, it's really a defense of our democracy.
During her 12 years of leadership at the AFT, Loretta has been a fierce advocate for racial equity.
Understand why we have so much gun violence.
The community issues, trying to have those voices heard.
In 2014, Loretta chaired the AFT Racial Equity Task Force, leading the AFT to become the first public sector union in modern history to issue a substantive report with concrete recommendations to achieve racial equity.
We have a window of opportunity to change the narrative in this country.
During her 30-year tenure as an AFT vice president, Loretta continued her indefatigable leadership by serving simultaneously as president of the Baltimore Teachers Union's paraprofessional chapter for 35 years and as president of AFT Maryland for 17 years. Loretta started her career as a teacher's aide in 1966 at a Baltimore elementary school where she earned $2.25 an hour and received no benefits.
There was no dignity. We weren't treated very well. Parents wanted a voice and to be treated with dignity and respect as a worker.
She organized the paraprofessionals into the Baltimore Teachers Union, and in 1970 negotiated their first contract, which laid the groundwork for her union activism in the Baltimore community and the state of Maryland, and countless contracts have been negotiated by her over the years. She uses her fearless intellect, moxie, and grace to speak truth to power, improve the working and economic conditions for paraprofessionals, working families.
Hi, I'm Loretta Johnson from the American Federation of Teachers, and we are knocking on doors asking you to vote.
And with sheer persistence and will, the democratic bonds of our country.
Sisters and brothers, I feel honored to congratulate my dear sister and an old friend, Loretta Johnson, for receiving this prestigious award, Labor Rights Defenders Award. I know her for many years as the fighter, a champion for civil rights, education rights, and the rights of educators. This is very, very appropriate time to honor such moral and compassionate voice like Loretta. We all know that due to COVID-19 pandemic, injustices and inequalities which were already prevailing in our society have been exacerbated. We also know that millions and millions of people, especially unorganized workers, have lost their jobs and on the verge of losing their jobs in the post-pandemic era. Worst affected are migrant workers, agriculture laborers, people working in unorganized and informal economy, and their children would be victimized most. By honoring people like Loretta, we are reaffirming our commitment and conviction and our promise for all those children, women, and men. Dear friends, over 1.5 billion school-going students are not able to go to school, and 1/3 of them are not having any access to digital education, online education. We also know that out of them, 380 million children and their families largely depended on midday meals or school feed programs or other incentives through schools education. But since they are not there, I'm afraid to say that a large number of them may not come back to school, and there would be a massive dropout, and that will result in child labor and child trafficking. And that's why we are demanding that there should be fair share for marginalized children and their families to protect them from corona pandemic now and in the future. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Liz, for that wonderful introduction. I'm always amazed and looking and recognizing who that person was that you made those remarks about. And as Liz said, I'm Dr. Loretta Johnson, and it was my privilege to serve as Secretary Treasurer of the American Federation of Teachers for more than 9 years before I stepped down at our convention in July. By the time I spent time on the board of the ILRF and have been a rewarding experience. So it's great to be here with so many friends in this vital work of advocating for the human rights of the marginalized workers around the globe. I want to thank Sharon for that wonderful speech and congratulate her on her award. And I am humbled by this recognition. And I thank you for considering me in the same company as your other distinguished awardees, Sharon Barrows. There's so much I could talk about this evening. I am a member of the GLF and ILRF board, as well as co-chair of the Child Labor Coalition. Just as we advocate for what children need in the classroom, in the AFT, we focus on facts that young workers need labor protection when they work in industrialized farming and when they work as migrant farmers, laborers, and when they're working in the crab picking, like in my home state of Maryland. Tonight, I want to draw your attention and you celebrate the extraordinary racial reckoning that's happening in American streets and boardrooms, city councils, chambers, media newsrooms, from Minneapolis to Louisiana, Kenosha, Wisconsin, to Rochester, New York. I speak to you today as a trade unionist that have fought against discrimination and have championed human rights for my entire life. From its very first days, the American Federation of Teachers has consistently opposed and fought racism and bigotry, as they are entirely contrary to our fundamental values of democracy. I spent a lifetime, 54 years, advocating for racial justice, racial equality in the union. And in my home union, the American Federation of Teachers, and in the AFL-CIO internationally, I've served on commissions, I've helped write reports, and you know what happened to most of them? They sat on the shelf collecting dust. Like every Black parent, I've had to talk with my sons and my grandchildren about how they conduct themselves, even though all the talks in the world couldn't have saved Breonna Taylor, Bodum Jean, from the beginning to the shot to the death. This time seems different for me. Like our late brother John Lewis, I have hope. In fact, I have more hope to changes than I have since 1968 and the murder of Dr. King. These demonstrations have already forced more changes and more coverage and more open conversation about policies, violence towards people of color, more debate about solutions to institutional racism and injustice than I've seen in decades. I can hardly believe what there is now of massive Black movement, Black Lives Matter, a statement on Fifth Avenue in New York and right across from the White House. That is why it's so important that we have the political leadership we need to make changes. And I know many of you cannot talk about politics, but in my union, the AFT, we can and we do. We must take our voices, make our voices heard, and they'll be heard in the voting booth. And we reject the appeal to racism and bigotry and broadcasts from the White House. In this campaign, we are fighting against a man who has made his life work engaged in racism. And we saw him on television the other night, bigotry. And he thinks he can get away with it. And as we say in AFT, we care, we fight, we show up, and we vote. And since this is a union crowd and a human rights crowd, that makes me want to say one final observation for my lifetime of experience. In this exciting, hopeful moment, let me be sure to look inwards at ourselves, into our unions and our own organizations, because diversity is a fundamental value of labor and it's a source of our strength. And we must expand and protect the opportunity for women, men of color, among the roles of union leadership and at every level. We don't need any more hand-wringing sisters and brothers. It's time for action. And I want to thank you for this opportunity and thank you for this great award.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. And those are very heart-touching words. I really appreciate. We need no more hand-wringing. We need action. And I thank you for that call to action for all of us, for everyone here, and for all of your leadership for so many years. And we really will take that flag forward.
Thank you for this opportunity. And I said again, thank you for this great award. I am humble. I'm in tears right now. I can't say anymore. I'm so excited.
Well, it is my honor now to introduce Reverend Liz Theoharis. I'm moved to introduce her as someone who has been, working towards the same direction that Dr. Johnson has called us to work towards. She is an ordained minister in the Presbyterian Church, teaches at Union Theological Seminary, and she is co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, along with Reverend Dr. William Barber, coming out of North Carolina. And for me, this campaign has been so powerful, coming from the South, reaching people that I know in my family and my friends in Tennessee and Louisiana, and really calling us to take a look at what's going on in the United States, and to look at as Smiley called us to do at the beginning, to take on the intersection of white supremacy and corporate power. Reverend Liz's work with poor people over the last 20 years has led her to work closely with a number of worker centers and trade unions, including Domestic Workers United, the National Union of the Homeless, Kensington Welfare Rights Union, and the Coalition of Immokalee Workers. For those of you who don't know Reverend Liz, you're probably getting the sense already that you're as likely to find her in a protest as in the pulpit, and that in addition to preaching on Sundays, she's also someone who speaks truth to power in the media, in the New York Times, in the TED Talks, and all the places, really challenging us. leaders from the faith community were some of the founders of the International Labor Rights Forum in the 1980s, bringing clarity and conviction to important solidarity work with Central American unions and communities. They were also part of the founding and the continuation of the US LEAP program with Steve Coates. We see the Poor People's Campaign as speaking with the same moral clarity today, the same clarity that Dr. Johnson just brought to us. And so for that, for all of that, Reverend Liz, we look forward to being an organization that is in solidarity and in alignment and in collaboration with the Poor People's Campaign going forward. And we thank you for presenting this Labor Rights Defenders Award to the Chicago Teachers Union.
Thank you all for being here today to celebrate these awardees and to recommit to taking up the fight for labor rights, economic rights, immigrant rights, voting rights, racial and social justice, and internationalism. It is my honor to present the 2020 Labor Rights Defenders to the Chicago Teachers Union. It is an honor as an organizer myself, a pastor, someone from a family of educators, a mother of urban school children, and co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. Since their first strike in 2012, the Chicago Teachers Union have showed us how to fight back against a narrative that demonizes teachers, care workers, and other public sector workers. Through their bold demands for students, for their willingness to strike and take risks, they have built a new kind of unity in the city, an understanding of the public good and how community can fight and win together for it. Their demand the school Chicago students deserve unified a fight for smaller class sizes, for prep time, nurses, counselors in every school. They put racial justice at the center of their demands, arguing for fair resources for schools that serve Black and brown students, for sanctuary schools for immigrants, restorative justice practices to disrupt the school to prison pipeline. Those in power, the mayor and others, tried to tell the CTU that these issues and housing issues had no place at the bargaining table. But CTU refused to back down. With teachers, students, and parents united, the Chicago Teachers Union drew on the legacy of unions and social movements with a transformative vision, a strategy, and action to match. The CTU's work is inspiring to us at the Poor People's Campaign. The Poor People's Campaign recognizes the truth that there are millions of poor people in the United States today who are poor because the wealth and resources of our country have been flowing to a small number of people, and federal programs are not meeting the growing needs of so many of us. The Poor People's Campaign centers an analysis that connects systemic racism and poverty, ecological devastation, militarism, and a distorted narrative that blames poor people and people of color for all of society's problems, tries to demonize us and pit us against each other, and feeds us the lie of scarcity when we live actually in a world of beautiful abundance. We recognize the need for a new narrative and to build power among the people. The Poor People's Campaign demands living wages and health care, basic dignity and rights for everyone. And we see that the Poor People's Campaign and the Chicago Teachers Union are aligned in so many ways. At the core of our work is local organizing, but we know that each is steeped in an understanding of the global economy. One example for the Chicago Teachers Union includes an understanding of migration, of sanctuary city demands. For the Poor People's Campaign, we connect with social movements all over the world to build bridges and hold out the hope that when we lift from the bottom, everybody rises. We have a saying in our work, somebody's been hurting our children for far too long, and we won't be silent anymore. The Chicago Teachers Union, you are an inspiration to all of us. You have been sounding the alarm on injustice. You have been building and organizing and mobilizing. Again, it is my honor to present this 2020 Labor Rights Defender Award to the Chicago Teachers Union.
Chicago's always been a labor town. and willing to fight for it. In fact, the original Labor Day was called International Workers' Day, or simply Workers' Day. All over the world, except for in this country, they've been celebrating International Workers' Day because of an event that happened right here in the city of Chicago on May 4th, 1886. It was called the Haymarket Affair. It was a protest, then a battle for an 8-hour workday, and they had to fight for that. People fought and died for this right, and their sacrifice is still felt today. And then in 1894, the Pullman rail strike shut down train traffic across this country. Led by A. Philip Randolph and the Pullman Porters of Chicago, they became the first black union in America.
Like any group of people who are trying to change the world, we're very conscious of our history. You know, we're conscious about where we've been in order to get a better understanding about where we're going.
CTU, this is your finest hour. Stand up, everyone. Stand up. Take a look around. Make them look like that. This is what democracy looks like.
Karen Lewis was our president. I was the vice president then, back in 2010, and it's been quite a ride since then.
And her voice was tremendous. Like, it wasn't just on Karen. It had to take every member of this union to get involved with preparing for 2012.
It was a real gut check. That is, none of us knew in advance that fighting Rahm Emanuel was going to be successful. You know, we just knew that it was something that we had to do.
I was devastated about the closings because they were first trying to close 200 schools, and with our pushback and our organizing, we forced them to narrow that number down to 50. It was hurtful. I thought it was devastating, and it was careless of CPS.
In 2015, a group of parents and community activists launched a hunger strike in order to save Diet High School. Those people went through physical hell, but in the end, we won, and there's a high school there because of their sacrifice.
One-day strike was interesting. I mean, we thought that they had gotten the message, CPS had gotten the message in 2012, but, you know, they never get the message, and we have to continually be prepared to do some type of work stoppage or inaction to show them that we're going to fight to the end.
Lori Lightfoot became mayor in 2019 behind a bunch of promises about the need for public services like schools. And then when she actually got in office, she refused to put those promises in writing in a contract.
Charter school workers deserve to be unionized. Many of them were putting in unforeseen hours of time, working 7 days a week, on call 24 hours a day.
The education industry is weakened if one part of the industry can be forced to work for lower wages in under exploitative conditions. The charter school, the unity that we have inside the education industry in Chicago, I hope should serve as an inspiration for workers everywhere, that if we're together, we're stronger.
And a teacher walkout across the state of Arizona.
A sea of red as a massive teacher walkout takes shape in Arizona.
A standoff in West Virginia, teachers vowing to stay out on strike.
5 days away from the Red for Ed Action Day at the Indiana State House in downtown Indianapolis.
Hundreds of schools were closed today in Oklahoma and Kentucky.
This is thousands of teachers in Los Angeles who walked off the job today.
A lot of teachers all across Oregon will not be in class. Instead, they'll be out hitting the pavement.
It was a revelation, I think, to the country to see teachers in red states on mass strikes, statewide strikes.
To see thousands of people in the Auditorium Theater downtown Chicago, taking over Michigan Avenue and Grant Park.
You know, I hope that the events in Chicago in 12, in fact, I know the events in Chicago in 12 were part of the inspiration.
We did set that pace. Chicago Teachers Union is one of the #1 unions, largest unions, I should say, in this country. And people look at us. They depend on us for information.
You know, we never claimed to invent union militancy, but we're glad and proud to be part of that tradition. Hopefully we can continue to inspire other people around the world in order to achieve better things for the future.
I came to know Miss Loretta Johnson about 25 years ago as a delegate. We would take trips to conferences with the American Federation of Teachers yearly. And I remember setting eyes on her and just listening to her for the first time. And I thought, wow, I want to be like Loretta Johnson. Like, man, she is powerful. Loretta Johnson started working as a teacher assistant back in 1966, but she fought hard for PSRPs then because they were not a part of the union, and she helped to organize the Baltimore Federation of Teachers Union for paraprofessionals, inviting them in. I think what made Loretta successful was she was there from the beginning. Loretta did not inherit a role, she created a role. Loretta will often say to us, if you see me in a fight with a bear, help the bear. So I want to say to Loretta, I'm not afraid of that bear because I know that I am prepared to handle him. And if you see me in a fight with the bear, Loretta, you better help him. So I just want to say, enjoy your retirement. You have done so much. We are forever grateful for you, paraprofessionals. I know here in the city of Chicago and all over this country appreciate you and appreciate the work that you've done.
Man, the CTU today, you know, I don't know if I mean, hopefully we lead that union with a sense of vision. But it's also a union where there's 1,000 rank and file activists. So really it's the movement, the activists that we have in the CTU are as varied as the city, and what unites us is that we're inspired by a vision of how we can be stronger together.
It's important for us to have a global relationship when it comes to this, because an injustice for one is an injustice for all. It doesn't matter where you are, it doesn't matter where you come from. If people can see an inkling of an opportunity to tear us apart, they will.
The labor movement has always been an international movement, and I think it's at the heart of our vision about how things can be better, which is that workers of all countries need to unite, and that is especially important now when the people in the highest office of the land are working so hard to pit us against each other. I think anyone who isn't a little bit worried about the future of the country isn't paying enough attention. So that can be demoralizing. You know, yeah, their forces are strong, but so are ours. We're many. We are diverse. We are inspiring in our own ways, you know, and we love. You know, we're not doing this out of some perverse sense of wanting to control the planet and our greed. We're doing this because we want to have a good future to raise our children in, and we have a vision of a better planet. And so, you know, I hope that sense of love for other people and a brighter future, that people are inspired by that. Get close to the people who are work beside you and who are in these movements, and it will sustain us through a lot. And it will be critical because we're going to have some tests, but at the end of the day, I'm confident that we can win.
Thank you to the Chicago Teachers Union for that inspiring video. And thank you to Jesse and Crystal for your words, and especially to Crystal again for lifting up Dr. Johnson and all that we can learn from her. We all have a lot of bears to fight in the coming years, and we feel more inspired and strong to do it with those words. And, you know, when we chose these awardees, we didn't know, or we couldn't have anticipated how important teachers would be in all of our lives at this time, the incredible work that they would be doing, helping keep our young people on track, helping educate our young people about the global economy. And so we especially lift up the Chicago Teachers Union and teachers all across the United States at this really important time. So I'd like now to introduce Sue Longley, who is the General Secretary of the International Union of Agricultural, Hotel, Restaurant, Catering, Tobacco, and Allied Workers Associations. We often shorten that for IUF. Sue is the General Secretary of the IUF and the first woman to hold this position. Her background comes from organizing farm workers and plantation workers, workers who more of us are starting to understand are often excluded from legal protections under the laws of their countries, and at the same time are the base workers on supply chains that are highly profitable for multinational corporations. So Sue has a big job and an important one. For global labor justice and the International Labor Rights Forum, we historically have fought hard with farm workers, seafood processing workers, hospitality workers, demanding with them dignity and respect on the job against major corporations, and demanding a change to this historical legacy of racism that has led to labor standards, to their exclusion from labor standards at the national and global level. Sue is someone I have learned a lot from. She has a very crisp analysis of the moment and also a very welcoming and open coalition building way of working that enables many people to come together and stand with farm workers and the workers represented by IUF. Sue, we appreciate your willingness to present the Labor Rights Defenders Award today to the General Agricultural Workers Union of Ghana. I also want to really say that I'm lucky to be able to be a part of presenting this award. I was very lucky to learn from many community organizers and leaders in Ghana as a young person who really taught me how it is that working people stand up to austerity and structural adjustment and demand decent work and decent communities. So it's my special privilege to be able to recognize the Ghanaian Agricultural Workers Union in this award.
Thanks, JJ. I'm very honored to have been asked to present this award to our affiliate GAWU in recognition of its role as a labor rights defender. But first, let me give you a little bit of context. Agriculture is a very difficult sector to organize. There are barriers, both legal and logistical. In some countries, agricultural workers are exempt from labor legislation, and in others have lower levels of protection. There's very little collective bargaining. The ILO ranks agriculture alongside mining and construction as one of the 3 most dangerous industries to work in. 71%, yes, 71% of all child labor takes place in agriculture alone. Since it was founded in 1959, GAWU has had a broad vision of the role of the trade union movement and an understanding that the union had to work beyond collective bargaining and have a broader agenda to reach out to the rural community. In the 1970s, GAWU established a rural workers department to bring in small cocoa farmers and self-employed workers. They were one of the first unions that I know of to have that sort of approach. Since then, GAWU has always gone on to tackle the challenging issues. On occupational health and safety, they lobbied the Ghanaian government to make sure that Ghana was one of the first countries to ratify ILO Convention 184 on safety and health in agriculture. They work on equality, they work on food security, they work on the climate crisis, and of course on the issue of child labour. For many years, GAWU has challenged the cocoa and chocolate industry to eliminate child labour in its supply chains. And more recently, they've also been challenging the fishing sector to end the use of child labour. So GAWU absolutely deserves this award as a labour rights defender. And I'm very proud and pleased to be able to present this to my good friend and comrade, Andy Tago. Andy, I know you and the team at GAWU are very disappointed that we can't be there in person to celebrate this together, but I think from all of us here in the IUF, from everybody participating today, A huge congratulations to GAWU. This award is really, really deserved. You are without doubt labour rights defenders par excellence. Enjoy the award.
My name is Andrew Stego. I'm the Deputy General Secretary of the General Agricultural Workers Union, GAWU, of the Trades Union Congress, Ghana. On behalf of the General Agricultural Workers Union, the national leadership, the National Executive Council, my colleagues, and my hard-working project team members, we are very, very, very happy and honored. We are indeed very elated to receive this prestigious award, the Labour Rights Defender Award. We want to use this opportunity to thank our colleagues and our partners. Indeed, this award is not only for GAWU, but it's for all of us who have contributed to making cocoa farming safer, to making agriculture safer, and to making children come out of child labor into schools and adults do decent work. We use this opportunity to also express our profound gratitude to our development partners who have worked with us through thin and thick. The International Union of Food, IUF, the FNV, EVOS, ILO, the Stop Child Labor Campaign, the Solidarity Center in the US, and the United States Department of Labor. We also want to thank the government of Ghana through the Ministry of Employment and Labor Relations, the Ghana Cocoa Board. We want to dedicate the award to you all, and especially the children who have been rescued through the work of GAWU. We have won this award together, and we are most grateful to all of us. The General Agricultural Workers Union have to use creative ways in organizing within the informal economy, which is not normally a terrain for trade unions. Trade unions are known for the formal sector, but we have ventured into the informal sector by organizing farmers, including cocoa farmers. And one of the key needs of cocoa farmers is that their children should be in school. And the best cocoa farmer is the educated farmer. And today, GAWU is organizing over 30,000 cocoa farmers and addressing decent work deficit needs of the farmers. We have addressed the safety conditions of the farmers, and we have improved alternative livelihood sources even with the farmers. And we have children who have been rescued and they are today advocates. Some of them actually have become members of our union. GAWU indeed had mended the chain that was broken. And the chain that was broken is to get the informal sector workers refixed into the main value chain so they can defend their rights. The COVID-19 pandemic actually changed our way of work. We used to go and meet large numbers of people. Nowadays, we can't anymore. So we are improving our technology and our way of reaching our farmers. Again, children were totally left out of responses for COVID-19. Their parents were doing their jobs. Their teachers, the schools were closed down. So children were left at home without any parental guidance, and the teachers were also not there to help them at school. So children were exposed more during the COVID-19 time. GAWU had to change our strategy, but going back to these children and beginning to think about how to save children during this COVID-19 period. And we developed their own face masks and nose masks for them. We educated them to access education and learning opportunities during the COVID-19 time. And the teachers, I must be very grateful to, where some of them were in the schools to provide COVID period education that respects COVID protocols, so children can do their homework and the rest. And the union, as GAWU, also notified all agricultural institutions in Ghana to provide nose masks, hand sanitizers, and then washing equipment for all our agricultural workforce. So indeed, GAWU responded to the COVID-19 pandemic. We face a lot of challenges in organizing agricultural workforce. Predominantly, this group live in very remote areas. The roads are very bad to reach them. And we need to also mobilize them to access facilities. And the law does not cover them. They are the blind side of the law. The agricultural terrain had been very, very difficult. And that is why child labor also exists in this area. The union had developed child labor free zone approach to addressing our organization of farmers within the agricultural sector using integrated area-based approaches that are more sustainable and owned by community chiefs. Our main challenges have been the way farmers are organized. Our farmer organizations lack investment for farmers to be strong enough to represent themselves, negotiate them for themselves, and then bridge that representational gap. They have been reduced to receivers, and our farmers have the right to be organized. They have the right to determine how programs and projects are run in their communities. We in GAWU have called for farmer organization for their promotion and participation in the projects and programs that the value chain organizes in Ghanaian communities. The farmers have been so vulnerable in these latter times. We have also called that all investments that are made in addressing the needs of cocoa farmers in Ghana must pass through the National Plan of Action, which we as civil society organizations have all bought into and think is the way to go. It is possible to produce cocoa without child labor. It is possible to produce, do agriculture without child labor. And it is possible to do this when farmers are allowed to organize and organize and organize, to belong to their unions of their choice, to be part of the determination of prices and other items that affects their livelihoods. Finally, we in the General Agricultural Workers Union, GAWU, are highly motivated by this award. We will do more. We are more committed and we are more dedicated. We invite all partners, like-minded partners, to work with us, partners in the value chain, and all partners who want to ensure that the farmer has a decent way of living and the child is in decent schools. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy and GAWU, and we look forward when travel is safe again for you to welcome you to the United States so that you can meet with many of the people on this call and figure out how we can even further support your work. So in some years, this will be the end of the program. However, this year we have a special honoree to add. For those of you who are regulars at this event, you know that I am a new face. And before me was the ILRF's fearless leader, Judy Gearhart. This is our first event as the merged organization of Global Labor Justice and the International Labor Rights Forum. There's more to come on all we're excited to build together. But for a moment now, we want to pause and honor the dedicated service and enduring commitment of my friend and colleague, Judy Gearhart, who led the ILRF for the last decade. To introduce Judy, I'm going to pass the baton to Lance Compa. Lance is one of the founders of the International Labor Rights Forum and a humble giant in our field. He's played a critical role in bringing together the US labor movement, the international human rights movements, and through his work as a union organizer, campaigner, lawyer, and scholar. Through his teaching, he's trained up a generation of labor lawyers, organizers, and researchers. And And even with all of his accolades and experience, he's one of the best listeners that I know and has been a really important part of this merger process and supporting our organization going forward. We're so happy he's continued on the GLJ ILRF board this year to help us in our strategic and organizational direction. Lance brings many, many things to the table, but I want to recognize one important one because it's an important value that we take forward as an organization. Lance has written extensively on US violations of international labor standards. And when I first became a lawyer and was representing farm workers in the south of the US, I used to carry around the report that he wrote called Blood, Sweat, and Fears about human rights and international labor standards violations in the US poultry sector. As GLJ moves forward, we commit to continuing this important work and avoiding US exceptionalism in this field. So thank you, Lance, for presenting this important award to Judy. After Lance introduces and presents the award, we'll have some special guest stars appear to appreciate Judy's leadership, culminating with a special presentation by Representative Jan Schakowsky, who is the House of Representatives from Illinois District 9 and is also co-chair of the International Workers' Rights Caucus.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining this important event in the long history of the International Labor Rights Forum and the just beginning history of the newly combined ILRF and Global Labor Justice. I'm so pleased to introduce Judy Gerhardt, actually to reintroduce her since so many of you know and have worked with Judy over the years, in connection with this award, recognizing her for dedicated service and enduring commitment to workers' rights. I think I first learned of Judy and her work almost 30 years ago when she began making her mark in our field. First at the Washington Office on Latin America, then through years of on-the-ground work in Mexico and Honduras on workers' rights, women's rights, child labor, and democratization. Then as program director at Social Accountability International. Since she became ILRF's executive director in 2011, I've had the pleasure of working closely with Judy and the talented staff that she inherited and over time added to ILRF in the past decade. Judy carried on a tradition of visionary leadership at ILRF, starting with our founding director, Ferris Harvey, followed by Terry Collingsworth and Bama Athreya. The long tenure of each of them is a tribute to the stability and effectiveness of the organization. Each of them oriented the work of ILRF to the challenges of their time, making some course corrections, but always toward the goal of strengthening workers' rights and human rights in the global economy. Some highlights of Judy's tenure include the key role that she and ILRF played in the Bangladesh Accord, the cotton campaign that began under Bama and reached new levels of accomplishment in recent years, the Seafood Working Group, the work to end child labor in cocoa, in the cocoa sector in West Africa, the Fifes campaign and other work in Central America that has carried on the mission of US Labor Education in the Americas project, and our sorely missed comrade, Steve Coates, and many, many more projects that Judy initiated and contributed to. Judy is moving on, but she's not moving away. She'll be right down the road, taking a well-deserved sabbatical as a visiting scholar at American University's Accountability Research Center. There, she'll have time to think and write about her experiences and lessons learned, focusing on how transnational coalitions can strengthen grassroots activists' influence. Judy will be right at home at a university base. Alongside her life as an activist, she's always found time to participate in intellectual debates and to give back to the younger generations coming up behind us, teaching human rights and development policy at Columbia University for the past 20 years. We all look forward to the fruits of Judy's sabbatical project. It would be nice if we could promise her space and time to think and write without bothering her. but I suspect it will be hard both for us and for Judy not to re-engage her in the struggles we all face. So Judy, this is not adios. It's not even hasta luego. It's hasta mañana. And we'll say to you, like Victor Laszlo says to Rick at the end of Casablanca, welcome back to the fight, my friend. This time I know our side will win.
Hi, it's Jan Schakowsky here. I have been very privileged in my 22 years in Congress to meet many incredible people who have made a difference. But Judy Gerhardt is very, very special to me because she not only changes legislation, but she directly changes people's lives. She is an organizer that can make a big difference and yet a particular difference on the lives of ordinary people all over the world. I remember vividly that in 2013, the Rana Plaza in Bangladesh collapsed. Over 1,000 people were killed, 2,500 injured. These were women in the textile industry that were dead. I know that Judy cares about workers in the city of Chicago, union workers who fought to make sure that they are not harassed on the job, and actually passed an ordinance in the city of Chicago. I know that people from all over the world, from Cambodia, from Uzbekistan, have been the subject of ILRF and Judy's attention to end the kind of terror that so many individuals that are working hard every day, worker defenders, human rights defenders, who are at risk. And so the granular work that she does that adds up to such big accomplishments is what Judy's been about. I love you for that, Judy. I did prepare a statement that is in the congressional record that I hope this very night will be presented to you. Just a small reminder to everyone on the lifelong record that will be there talking about you and your work. I appreciate you so much. Thank you.
John Cavanna, it's my great pleasure to join this tribute to Judy tonight. When I think of Judy, burning commitment to justice across borders, an ability to garner trust across this enormous expanse between grassroots labor rights groups on the ground in the developing world and the halls of Congress. For that, we are eternally grateful.
Under Judy's leadership, ILRF has tackled some of the most vexing problems we face. She's worked closely with partners in Congress and federal agencies. Judy, thank you for the amazing work you did to make the ILRF such a powerful voice for exploited workers around the world.
Judy's absolute fierce dedication to workers and global supply chains, our partners across the world. I can remember sitting down at the table with some apparel brands. Judy was incredibly firm and clear, saying that normal CSR was not going to cut it, and we were moving to a new model, enforceable brand agreement. Lastly, I'd be remiss if I didn't say something about her good sense of humor, ability to have fun on the job. Judy was the first to lead us out to happy hour and dangerous in the ping pong table as well. So congrats, Judy, and good luck to JJ and the new GLJ ILRF.
Just wanted to thank Judy Gerhardt for the work she's done over the last 10 years leading the ILRF, the International Labor Rights Forum. But we had a campaign going on and chocolate company in Seattle called Theo that had been union busted, and there were some international aspects to it. She jumped right in, was creative with her ideas, quick learner, picking up on what was going on, and tenacious and supporting and following through on efforts to support those workers. Judy, you've been a friend, a great advocate. Thank you very much for all you've done.
I know Judy
about a decade. Throughout this time, together we have done many work. I really thank her for her contribution to ILRF and also in the worker rights across the globe. Judy, love you.
Hola, estoy aquí para rendir agradecimiento y en especial a la compañera ex directora de ILRF y su equipo, que en el trabajo aquí en Honduras en cuanto a el seguimiento a la campaña que en este momento se está haciendo por los casos específicos de FAI. Agradecimiento han hecho, ¿verdad?, a favor de miles de trabajadores y trabajadoras.
Judy really brings heart to the work of labor rights and corporate accountability. She's able to connect the technical conversations in US law or standards or trade agreements and really connect it to the voices and experience of workers, especially women workers, whether in the banana fields in Central America or the apparel factories in Bangladesh. For Judy, it's never abstract.
Hey Judy, I'm so glad I get to join in honoring you today. Your ability to bring grassroots voices in front of power, persuasive policy arguments, whether you're speaking, to an elected member of Congress or to a government official, no matter what you are saying in your advocacy, you bring a sense of power from the grassroots with you. And I really want to honor you and say thank you and good luck.
Hi, Judy. Thank you for your leadership and especially your leadership and commitment to ending violence against women at work and gender-based violence. I appreciate all the help that you've given us on hands off, pants on, and all of the positive energy you gave. As you go on to your next challenge, I know that you will knock it out of the park. And I just want to let you know that we are here in support of you.
Hola Judy, te habla Cecilia Leiva desde Chicago para desearte muchas felicidades y saber que estuviste con nosotros el derecho a la mujer, que es algo muy grandioso en Hobo. Estamos muy satisfechos de todo el trabajo que hiciste. Es algo bonito que llevas en tu corazón y qué es lo más que te espera el mundo ahora que te vas. Te deseo lo mejor de lo mejor. Te recuerdo. Buena suerte. Good luck.
Hi, Judy. I am so thrilled to get to celebrate you and your many contributions to the global labor movement. There's so much commitment to the rights and respect that all workers deserve, regardless of where they work, what sectors they're in, how formal or informal they are, and of course, your deep commitment to women's leadership. All have inspired me. You've also been such an important and consistent voice in holding U.S. brands accountable to the way they treat workers outside of the U.S. Thank you for that, for being that voice and for helping to shape our broad global labor movement. You should feel so proud of all that you've done to strengthen ILRF, to forge a new partnership with global labor justice. I wish you all the best in your next chapter.
Hello, thank you, Lance, Ashwini, Sukhankar, Catherine Isaac, the entire ILRF board and staff. It has been an amazing honor to serve ILRF and the phenomenal grassroots partners ILRF works with around the world these past 9+ years. The power of this work comes from ILRF's long-term commitment to those grassroots partners and the work they do, which inspires us all. We know that no amount of international policy reform is going to make a difference unless they can leverage those reforms to advance their struggle on the ground. I have been so thrilled to work with JJ these past several months to bring together the ILRF and GLJ teams. It is going to be an amazing base for workers. I'm so excited to see JJ leading this work going forward. I know they're going to need our support. I will be supporting them. I hope everybody who's listening tonight will be supporting them for a long time. I'm especially happy to see this first big ILRF GLJ event be focused on some of the best advocates in the fight to end child labor. Teachers. My mom was a teacher. She is my inspiration to this day. She was a paraeducator and then a reading specialist, and she brought her work home often. She was always trying to figure out how to inspire kids to be excited about reading, and especially the kids that were struggling. She would worry about them and think of things to come up with to make them excited. I've met teachers in Africa and Central America who walk miles to get to their classrooms. These are some of the most dedicated people in the world. They work for the kids they teach and the communities they work in. There's no surprise here that the teachers unions are putting forth some of these most amazing leaders in the labor movement, the phenomenal Sharon Burrow, the iconic Dr. Loretta Johnson, and Chicago Teachers Union, Red for Ed movement, bargaining for the common good. You all deserve our support and more. It's amazing what you're doing, not just for your members, but for equity in the community. You know, just like the heroic Ghanaian Agriculture Workers Union, that the fight is not just about your members, but it's also about the children and everyone in the communities you work in. And Gawu, we're with you. We need to end child labor in cocoa, and we can only do that if your members have the power to bargain for better wages. I am really thrilled to be able to congratulate the awardees tonight and to pledge my support, my continuing, never-ending support for GLJ, ILRF. It's going to be a great organization. Everyone listening tonight, I hope you will donate early and often, and I hope you will stick with them because the work they do matters. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Judy, for all that you've done, and we know that for all the support that you'll give in the future. We look forward, as Lance said, this is not goodbye. It's just on to the next walk in the road. Now I want to pass to Cam Duncan, a member of tonight's host committee, to thank our sponsors. And I want to give a special shout out to Cam and other members of the host committee who volunteered to be on the host committee of a live event celebrating awardees in June, and have been with us on the road since then. They've helped us through the merger. They've given us advice on going digital, and they've really been anchors of the process. So please do look in your program to the 15 folks and appreciate them, shout them out if you know them in the chat, and just say thanks. It's a huge thanks from all of our hearts to them. Cam, besides being on the host committee, has spent his life lifting up workers' rights and justice in Central America and in Puerto Rico. He was an international economist for Greenpeace and then Public Services International, and also as a teacher in a labor college in New Mexico. He's been on the ILRF board for over a decade, including a stint as its chair, and is now a key part of our strategy council. Cam, we really thank you for being someone, as my family says, who walks the talk, and promoting deep solidarity and internationalism in your ideas and in your actions. And I'll pass to you now to thank our sponsors.
Thank you so much, JJ. What a beautiful sentiment to all of our award winners tonight. My name is Cam Duncan, and I'm a member of our host committee. I've been a supporter of the International Labor Rights Forum since its founding 35 years ago. And I'm so excited for the opportunities and strength that this merger brings to the labor movement. I'm grateful that our event sponsors continue to be engaged with Global Labor Justice, ILRF, in support of its new leadership and its ever more relevant mission of increasing resources and organizing solidarity for workers, unions, and labor movements, fighting for respect and building systemic change locally and globally across the planet. This part of our struggle for a better world is what motivated me as a labor educator to serve on the Labor Rights Forum board and to support it financially. I knew that my donation financed buses, organizers, training, and media access to enable workers and their organizations in countries like Honduras, in Ghana, in Bangladesh, in Thailand, and many others to more effectively fight for their rights that are so critical in this time of global pandemic. Moving this type of work takes a lot of people coming together. We deeply appreciate the number of you here tonight supporting the fight for workers' rights globally. We'd like to thank everyone who has so generously supported our event tonight. At the leadership circle level, the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. At the visionary level, the American Federation of Teachers, which is my union as a labor educator, and the ARCA Foundation. And at the Guardian level, Laborers International Union of North America, the Service Employees International Union, the International Association of Machinists, and Global Works Foundation. And really, a huge thank you to everyone who has supported global labor justice and the International Labor Rights Forum with your donations and made this event such a success tonight. These contributions play a huge role in moving such important work, especially at a time where corporations and governments are using the pandemic as an excuse to bust unions, cut wages and social safety nets, and turn pandemic into profit. This is a time in the program where if we were all together, we would pass the hat around. That's not possible, so we're trying something a little new. For those who are watching and who are able, we have another way for you to contribute now. If you're able, please use the text to donate information on the screen and share with us in the comments your pledge. I know it's a difficult time, but maybe you have some resources from a trip you weren't able to make, or going to the movies or concerts or out to dinner. This is a chance to support an organization that'll use the resources to build global relationships between workers around the world and workers in the US, and support them with research, advocacy, campaign support. The resources we know it takes to fight back against greedy corporations and build towards great equality among workers and to strengthen their organizations and unions. Thank you again for your engagement and support. Thank you for sticking with us in these tough times.
Thank you, Cam, and thank you again to all our sponsors who've committed to supporting the work through supporting this event, even in a difficult year. So the section we're moving into now is called Recommitment to Mission. And we really want to remind ourselves that today we're pausing to celebrate together, and tomorrow we hope to move forward together. And we really hope you'll join us. We hope that next year we'll have a slideshow and there'll be photos from Houston and Atlanta, and Portland, and Miami, and Orlando. All of you will be with us in these photos, and we'll be meeting together, analyzing things together, and taking action together as well. For these remarks, I introduce my friend and colleague, Ananya Bhattacharjee, who's International Coordinator of the Visionary Asia Floor Wage Alliance and a trade unionist in India, also someone who's been a key and important advisor to many worker centers in the United States. It's fitting for me that Ananya holds this portion of the program because she has that effect on me and others around her of really grounding us in what's important and in the transformative purpose of our movements, of helping us see beyond what's right in front of our faces or what we think is possible in a particular moment, and of always showing up with both real talk and a wicked sense of humor, and building the teams to make this work happen, and investing, in organizations like Global Labor Justice, Jobs of Justice, and many others over many, many years. Over the last 10 years, she's worked with trade unionists and workers' rights NGOs in garment production countries to develop the kind of model that Smiley talked about when we opened the program, new forms of bargaining that think regionally, that hold corporations at the top of supply chains accountable, and that give spaces for women trade unionists, women workers to lead their trade unionists and to lead in global bargaining. She's a deep builder of intersectional movement and progressive internationalism. Ananya, thank you for sharing your words on recommitment to mission in this section. And as Ananya offers her words of wisdom from Bangalore, feel free to let us know in the comments if you're with us in the next year, if we can call on you, our partners can call on you in labor fights, and if you'll be showing up, and if we'll see you in the slideshow next year.
As a GLJ ILRF's board member, I want to say that I'm so excited about our mission together, which is as a unified voice, I think is really powerful. And I look forward to working with everybody in the coming years. It's really important today that we all have taken the time to celebrate together with our inspiring awardees, to recognize their leadership and accomplishments, celebrating inspiring leaders, celebrating their accomplishments, remembering what it took us to get here, and then to prepare for the journey forward. Let's pause for a minute to also think about what COVID-19 has exposed for us in very stark and dramatic terms. It has definitely exposed an inhuman business model that is operating globally and which is setting the norm for informalizing employment increasingly through leveraging workers' social vulnerabilities. How bad can that be? How did we get here? The workers, the most vulnerable workers, are being deliberately hired to mine their vulnerabilities for greater profit. That is unacceptable. And this is the business model of the dominant mode of production in the world today called the global supply chain. What we need to bring back is fairness and justice to the global production networks of the global supply chains. Today, what has become very commonplace, a dominant paradigm, is this belief that living wage and social security, building of public safety infrastructure like schools and healthcare, are wasteful and inflationary expenditures, that they are anti-development. Living wage is considered anti-development. However, the unreasonable profit margins of the multinationals are then touted as evidence of development. How much of a paradox can this be? We have to reverse this. We have to bring back decent work, living wage, social security back to center stage, and bring back the sentiment of public distribution to our societies and to the world at large. We cannot compromise on our vision and just say COVID-19, everybody's suffering. We have to dampen our demands from living wage to higher minimum wage. No, we must continue with our vision of transforming the supply chain for greater equity and for no less than living wage and social protection for workers. We have to make sure that the multinationals pay the true cost of the supply chains, and also that they do so through an enforceable and binding mechanism. As a board member of GLJ and ILRF and an advisor to GLJ before the merger, since the founding, we have been focused on expanding transnational organizing efforts to create new kinds of solidarity that is based on mutual reciprocity. By this, I mean, coming from Asia, I mean a relationship between global North and global South, which is based on equality. and mutual self-interest, which is not based on patronage, that is not based on a top-down relationship, but based on the fact that both regions have strategies to contribute and that both have to be involved in building and co-developing strategy. We need new strategies. We need new pressure points. And this has to be created through this creative energy within the GLJ ILRF hub along with its allies. And I look forward to doing that. When something dramatic happens, it is an opportunity for us to reframe and re-energize and make our demands mainstream rather than dilute them. So I really look forward to working with all of you across North and South borders and to building the leadership of women workers from the Global South and working people across the world for a planet that we can all be proud of building together. Thank you very much.
Thank you to all of you who've stuck with us for this beautiful event. A special thanks to the host committee, to the Global Labor Justice International Labor Rights Forum Board of Directors, who have been really critical at this time of the merger. And a huge shout out to everyone on our team of staff. Some of you are meeting them in the chats. Some of you are talking to them about their work probably, and hopefully we'll find more ways to know them going forward. A real special appreciation to our Labor Rights Defenders Awards team internally, which includes Patricia, Caitlin, and Nosley, who've made this all happen. And we also want to recognize the families and supporters of everyone on the staff that are here on the call. And I want to give a special shout out to my nieces, Avery and Olivia in Denver. You know, we as a staff team have committed that we're going to talk more to our families. We're going to talk more to our friends who are not just people in DC. We know that understanding the global economy, what it means for us and what it means for working people all around the world, it's the job of all of us to learn from each other and to be in this together. We also want to support our major supporters for the event, the Teamsters, the American Federation of Teachers, ARCA Foundation, the machinists, the laborers, SEIU, Cam Duncan, Dan Henkel, Joe Elridge, and Maria Otero, and the Global Works Foundation. I'm honored for my final introduction to be of Pablo Alvarado. Pablo is one of the co-directors of the National Day Labor Organizing Network, which is one of the anchors of the National TPS Alliance. And Pablo is also a member of the band, Los Jornaleros del Norte, who brought us into this event and will close us out. Pablo has been an important advisor and friend to me since I began supporting the legal and policy work of the Congress of Day Laborers in New Orleans, working with Honduran workers coming to the United States after Hurricane Katrina. And his work and the work of Endelon really embodies what we at GLJ ILRF sometimes talk about as integrated strategy. It's where we bring our best research and analysis and policy and law and campaigns to support organizing and enable that organizing work to expand. And when I think of Pablo, I think of someone who has made that happen in so many different contexts. For those who don't know, immigrants who hold temporary protected status received a really difficult ruling in a court case last week. And they're now meeting in cities across the country to devise strategy. These are workers in hospitality, food processing, care, and construction sectors, many strong union members, many people living in our communities. You probably know them wherever you are. Endelon, in collaboration with the Worker Center in El Salvador called Semitra, has built a transnational campaign to help defend TPS. And we hope that we can continue to support that campaign and others like it. Pablo, thank you for coming to speak to us from Las Vegas on the bus with the TPSanos. We commit to being with you and the TPS Alliance in the next phase of the fight to defend TPS.
Hi, my name is Pablo, and I am one of the directors of Endelon, the National Day Labor Organizing Network. I am also a proud board member of the Global Labor Justice International Labor Rights Forum. I am sending this message from Vegas, where I am accompanying an amazing group of immigrants with temporary protected status as they quite literally connect TPS holders from coast to coast in resistance of Trump's sinister plans to delegalize or de-document people from places he calls shithole countries. Pause for a moment to consider what is at stake. For all of the terror Trump has imposed and the racist rhetoric, imagine if he succeeds in taking away papers from migrants. What's next? Who's next? The good news, we're not going to let it happen. Tepecianos, many members of unions and worker centers are building power with speed and scale that I haven't seen since I myself got TPS over 20 years ago. Tepecianos are defending their families. They are defending their constitutional rights shared by U.S. citizens. And they are defending the countries from which they came. The efforts to defend TPS, like the efforts for a living wage and dignified work, cannot just be understood as a U.S. struggle within U.S. borders. This must be understood in a transnational context or even a translocal context. This is why, as Endilon, we have committed to working transnationally, supporting the very first worker center in El Salvador called Simitra, and anchoring the corridors of justice efforts across Central America, the U.S., and Mexico. We also know our efforts will have to be led by people, immigrant workers and refugees who are organizing with the support and assistance of others. For us, the Global Labor Justice International Labor Rights Forum is a vital partner in these efforts. It is serving as a connective tissue / conduit that is facilitating workers. I have been so proud to be an advisor to Global Labor Justice since its founding, and I am thrilled to be on the board of the Global Labor Justice International Labor Rights Forum. That's a long name. It's like my organization's name, the National Day Laborers Organizing Network. Long names are beautiful names. From here in Vegas, I am so happy to share my appreciation for this organization and its visionary leader, J.J. Rosenbaum, and all the inspiring awardees tonight, and everyone joining tonight. There are so many forces keeping us apart and dividing us, but when workers unite, particularly across international borders, that's when we can truly begin to confront the challenges ahead. Long live the working class. Que vivan los trabajadores, que vivan las trabajadoras, que vivan los migrantes, que vivan los tepecianos, que vivan las tepecianas.
Que te levantas todos los días a buscar trabajo para proveer para tu familia. Tu cubrebocas, tu mascarilla nunca debe de faltar. Aunque sea incómoda, es parte de la nueva realidad. No importa lo que diga el presidente, corporaciones y aquellos muy valientes. Y si es cierto que no es cierto, mientras tanto, mucha gente se nos muere. Póntela, 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 ponte bien la máscara, no te vayas a contagiar. Póntela, 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 ponte bien la máscara por tu salud y seguridad. que diga el presidente. Corporaciones y aquellos muy valientes. Y si es cierto que no es cierto, mientras tanto mucha gente se nos muere. Póntela, 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 ponte bien la máscara, no te vayas a contagiar. Póntela, 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 ponte bien la máscara por tu salud y seguridad. Póntela, 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 ponte bien la máscara cuando salgas a trabajar. Póntela, 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 ponte bien la máscara, a tu familia hay que cuidar. Póntela, 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 ponte bien la máscara, trabajadora esencial. Póntela, 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 ponte bien la máscara por tus amigos y comunidad.